Part 1. The New Neighbor 1000 Words. Claire Miller's life looked peaceful from the outside. She lived in a quiet neighborhood outside Chicago, in a two-story brick house with a white porch and a perfect little garden. To anyone passing by, she and her husband, David, seemed like the couple who had it all: stability, comfort, and a home full of love. But behind those closed doors, the spark between them had slowly faded into routine. David worked long hours as a financial analyst. He was kind, dependable, and steady, but his world revolved around numbers and schedules. Claire, 34, worked from home as a freelance designer. Her days were quiet: the same coffee in the morning, the same grocery runs, the same evenings waiting for David to come home. Their conversations had become polite exchanges instead of laughter. There were no fights, no drama, just silence that felt heavier every day. One summer afternoon, Claire sat on the porch with her laptop when she noticed a large moving truck stop next door. She watched with mild curiosity as a man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with an easy confidence. His skin glowed bronze under the afternoon sun, and his smile came effortlessly as he greeted the movers. When he caught Claire's eyes, he waved. "Hey there," he said with a warm grin. "I'm Marcus. Just moved in." Claire smiled back, caught a little off guard. "Welcome to the neighborhood. I'm Claire. Thanks. It's nice to meet a friendly face already." Something about the way he said it lingered in her mind. He had a deep, calm voice, and an energy that filled the space around him, relaxed, sure of himself, and somehow alive in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. Later that evening, when David came home, Claire mentioned the new neighbor casually. The house next door finally sold. His name's Marcus. "Seems nice." David nodded while scrolling through his phone. "Good. Maybe he'll take care of that lawn. It's been an eyesore." That was it. The conversation ended. Claire smiled faintly, realizing how little they really talked anymore. She didn't blame him. Work tired him out, but still. She missed the days when he used to notice small things, like her new dress or the way she'd changed her hair. The next morning, Claire went out to water her flowers and saw Marcus again. He was carrying a box-marked kitchen and struggling with it. "Need a hand?" she asked. He laughed lightly. "I think I need 3. These boxes don't unpack themselves." Claire giggled. "I can help for a few minutes." They worked side by side for a while, moving a few things inside. His home was simple but warm: modern furniture, a faint scent of cedar, and sunlight streaming through big windows. Claire learned that he was from Atlanta, worked as a sports therapist, and had moved to Chicago for a better job opportunity. He asked about her work, her favorite places in town, and even complimented her garden. "You've got a good touch," he said. "I kill every plant I own." Claire laughed. "Then I'll have to give you a few lessons." When she walked back home, she caught herself smiling. It had been a long time since she'd felt that light. She brushed off the thought quickly. It was just friendly conversation. But the warmth stayed. Over the next few weeks, Marcus settled in. He jogged every morning, waved at neighbors, and always greeted Claire when he saw her outside. Sometimes he'd stop for a short chat about the weather, work, or random things. Their talks were innocent, but there was a quiet chemistry neither of them could ignore. One afternoon, Claire was fixing a leaky faucet when Marcus knocked on her door holding a toolbox. "I saw you wrestling with that thing," he said with a grin. "Want some help?" She hesitated, then smiled. "Sure, it's winning the battle so far." He fixed it easily, showing her how to tighten the pipe. They talked as he worked about small-town life, their childhoods, and music. She realized he had a calm, thoughtful side beneath his confidence. When he left, she thanked him, and he said, "Anytime, neighbor." His tone was friendly, but his eyes lingered just a second too long. That evening, Claire cooked dinner for David and told him about Marcus helping with the faucet. "He seems really handy," she said. David nodded without looking up from his laptop. "Good to have a neighbor like that." Claire felt a small ache in her chest. She wanted him to ask more, to care, to notice how she was changing. But he didn't. He just went back to work. That night, lying in bed, Claire found herself thinking about Marcus again, about his laughter, his easy way of talking, how he looked at her like he actually saw her. She shook her head, pushing the thought away. It was nothing. Just a harmless distraction from a boring day. But in the following days, she found herself looking out the window more often. She'd spot him mowing the lawn, talking to the mailman, or walking his dog. Sometimes he'd wave, and she'd wave back, pretending it meant nothing. But deep inside, she felt that little spark, the one that told her she was still capable of feeling something thrilling. One Saturday, David had to attend a work meeting downtown. Claire spent the morning cleaning, then decided to take a walk. As she passed Marcus's house, he called out from his porch, "Hey, Claire, you free for a cup of coffee?" She hesitated, then smiled. "Sure, why not?" They sat outside, sipping coffee and talking about travel. He told her about his trips across the South, about how people there lived slower and smiled more. She told him about her dreams of starting her own studio someday. He listened, really listened, like her words mattered. When she got up to leave, Marcus said, "You should do it. Open that studio. You've got this light in your eyes when you talk about it." Claire laughed softly. "You think so?" "I know so." His words stayed with her all day. Later, while folding laundry, she realized she was humming something she hadn't done in months. David came home tired again, barely speaking. And Claire felt torn between comfort and emptiness. She didn't understand what was happening inside her. Only that life suddenly felt a little different, a little more alive. That night, lying awake, she whispered to herself, "It's just a crush. It'll fade, but deep down." She knew something was shifting, quietly, dangerously, in a place she thought had long gone numb, and though she didn't know it yet, Marcus's arrival was about to test everything she believed about love, loyalty, and the kind of happiness she truly wanted, for now. She only knew one thing. She couldn't stop thinking about him, and that small thought was enough to change everything. Part 2. The line she shouldn't have crossed. 1,000 words the weeks that followed felt like a blur for Claire. Marcus had become part of her everyday life, in small, unplanned ways that made it hard to ignore how her heart reacted each time she saw him. He waved when she drove by, dropped by to ask about her garden, or sometimes just smiled when they crossed paths. It all felt harmless. Yet every small moment pulled her closer to something she didn't fully understand. David was still the same, quiet, kind, but always tired. He often came home late, ate dinner while scrolling through his emails, and went to bed early. Claire tried to tell herself it wasn't his fault. Work had taken most of his energy. But deep inside, she missed the feeling of being seen, of being wanted. Marcus, on the other hand, noticed everything: a new dress, a change in her hair, even the small things she said. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was dangerous. One rainy afternoon, while thunder rolled in the distance, a knock came at the door. Claire opened it to find Marcus standing there, holding a broken umbrella and laughing. "Seems the weather doesn't like me much," he said. "Come in," she said without thinking. "You'll catch a cold." He stepped inside, dripping water on the floor. She handed him a towel, and they both laughed at the small mess. The sound of rain against the windows filled the room, and for a while, felt oddly comforting. They sat down with 2 cups of coffee, and the conversation flowed easily. What started with jokes about the weather turned into something deeper. They talked about their lives, about loneliness, about the fear of growing apart from the people they love, about how dreams often fade when responsibility takes over. Marcus told her how his last relationship ended because he worked too much. She said, "I was never really there," he said quietly. Maybe she was right. Claire nodded. "I know that feeling." Their eyes met for a second, too long. No words were spoken, but both understood what that silence meant. Something fragile had formed between them, not physical, but emotional, real enough to make her heart ache. When Marcus finally left, Claire stood at the door, watching the rain. Her hands were shaking. She hadn't done anything wrong, but it felt like she had stepped too close to a line she shouldn't cross. Over the next few days, things changed. Marcus texted her sometimes, small, harmless messages. "Did the rain stop?" Or "How's your garden surviving the storm?" She replied, trying to keep things casual, but their chats grew longer. They laughed, shared music, and sometimes talked late into the evening. It was emotional comfort, the kind that comes when someone listens without judgment. Yet every time she talked to him, guilt whispered in the back of her mind. She told herself it was fine, that they were friends, nothing more. But the truth was harder to admit. One evening, her best friend, Samantha, came over for dinner. They drank wine and talked about work, old memories, and life. But Samantha's eyes were sharp. She noticed the way Claire's face softened when she mentioned Marcus. "Who's Marcus?" she asked casually. "Oh, just my new neighbor," Claire said quickly. "He's nice." Samantha raised an eyebrow. "You've said his name 3 times already?" Claire laughed it off, but Samantha didn't. "Be careful, Claire. Emotional affairs start long before physical ones. I've seen it happen." The warning hit hard. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She looked at David sleeping peacefully beside her, and guilt filled her chest. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't unloving. He was just busy, caught in the same rhythm she was. He still cared. But their connection had grown faint, and she had let someone else step into that space. The next morning, she decided to create some distance. She didn't reply to Marcus's messages, avoided looking out the window, and stayed busy with work. But by evening, her phone buzzed. "Marcus, haven't seen you today. Everything okay?" She stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Just busy." He replied, "You've got that look, the one people get when they're pretending they're fine." Her heart skipped a beat. He knew her too well already. A few days later, David had to leave town for a conference. He kissed her goodbye, promised a call, and left early in the morning. That evening, Claire sat alone, staring at her half-finished dinner. The house felt too quiet. She turned on music, poured a glass of wine, and tried to distract herself. Then she heard a soft knock on the door. It was Marcus. "You okay?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "Yeah, it's been a long day," he nodded. "I was out for a walk. Thought I'd check in." She should have said no, but instead she stepped aside. "You can come in for a minute." They talked on the couch, laughter filling the silence that usually haunted her evenings. At one point, he told her, "You deserve to be happy, Claire. You're too kind to be invisible." The words hit her like a wave. No one had said something that honest to her in years. She wanted to thank him, to tell him to stop, but instead, she just sat there, silent. When the clock struck 11, he stood up. "I should go," he said softly. She nodded, unable to speak. After he left, Claire sat alone, her heart pounding. She hadn't crossed any physical line, but she knew she was already deep into something that could ruin everything. The next morning, she looked at herself in the mirror. There was a glow in her face and a shadow behind it. She didn't know which one was stronger. When David called that evening from his trip, she tried to sound normal. He told her about his meetings, and she told him about her day. But her voice trembled slightly, and he noticed. "Everything okay, Claire?" "Yeah," she said quickly. "Just tired." He didn't press. He never did. And that silence broke her heart more than anger ever could. Over the next few weeks, Claire tried to focus on her marriage. She cooked David's favorite meals, watched movies with him, and tried to restart the spark. But deep down, she knew something inside her had changed. Marcus wasn't just a neighbor anymore. He had become a reminder of what she was missing. Still, guilt began to weigh heavier than excitement. She started avoiding Marcus again. When he waved, she only smiled faintly. When he texted, she took hours to reply. Then one evening, she found a small note in her mailbox. "Did I do something wrong?" She held the paper in her hands for a long time, unsure of what to do. Finally, she tore it in half and threw it away. For days, she didn't see him. The neighborhood felt quieter, emptier. And though she tried to convince herself it was for the best, her heart ached every time she passed his house. She had crossed an invisible line, one that left no scars but changed her completely. She didn't cheat, not in the way people define it, but she had given a part of her heart away to someone who didn't belong in her story. And now she had to find a way to take it back before everything else fell apart. Part 3. The Truth Beneath the Calm 1,000 Words. The leaves had started to turn golden when Marcus told Claire he might be moving back to Atlanta. It was a casual conversation at first, just two neighbors talking on the sidewalk. But when he said the words, "I might leave soon," something inside her twisted. She nodded, pretending to be fine. But that night, she couldn't sleep. For months, he had been the one person who made her feel alive again, even when she wished it weren't true. Now he was leaving, and she didn't know what to feel: sadness, relief, or guilt. The days passed slower after that. She avoided looking toward his house, avoided the thoughts that tried to pull her back. David noticed she was quieter than usual, but assumed she was tired from work. He still didn't know what had been happening inside her heart. She wished she could tell him everything, but the truth felt too heavy. It's too complicated. A week later, on a gray Friday afternoon, she saw Marcus loading boxes into his car. Her chest tightened. She stood by the window, watching as he moved back and forth, his face calm, almost unreadable. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to stay inside and let it end silently. But something stronger pushed her forward. She grabbed her coat and stepped outside. The sky was low and full of clouds. She walked over, her heart beat fast but steady. "So, it's really happening," she said softly. He turned and smiled faintly. "Yeah, I got an offer back home. My mom's been asking me to come closer, and honestly, I think it's time." She nodded, forcing a smile. "That's good. You should be near your family." There was a short silence between them, the kind that carries all the words people don't dare to say. Finally, he said quietly, "You've been distant. I didn't want to make things harder for you." "You didn't," she said quickly, then paused. "Maybe you did a little, eh." He looked at her with kind eyes. "Claire, you don't owe me anything. You just needed to feel seen again. And I was there. That's all." She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but deep down, she knew he wasn't. Their connection had been real, not built on passion, but on understanding. It had reminded her that she was still human, still capable of feeling deeply. But now, standing there, she also realized how close she had come to losing everything that truly mattered. The first drops of rain began to fall. She felt a lump in her throat. "Marcus," she said, her voice trembling, "thank you for everything. But I think this, whatever it was, has to end here." He nodded. "I know." He stepped closer, his voice low but sincere. "Take care of yourself, Claire, and take care of him too. He's a lucky man, even if he doesn't know it." She smiled weakly, blinking back tears. "Goodbye, Marcus." "Goodbye," he said. And for the last time, he smiled, that same warm smile that had once made her heart skip. Then he got in his car and drove away, leaving behind nothing but the faint echo of what could have been Dot when she walked back home. The rain had turned into a steady downpour. She stood in her kitchen, soaked in silence, feeling like a part of her life had just ended. But strangely, it wasn't sadness that stayed. It was clarity. For the first time in a long while. She saw her reflection in the window and recognized herself again. That night, David came home early. He looked tired but calm, carrying takeout food and a soft smile. "Thought we could eat together," he said. "It's been a while." Claire's heart softened. They sat down, ate quietly, and for once, she wasn't pretending. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was real, fragile, but honest. Halfway through dinner, David looked at her carefully. "You've seemed different lately," he said. "I don't know how to explain it, but it feels like you've been somewhere far away, even when you're right here." Claire froze. For a second, she wanted to confess everything, the messages, the feelings, the quiet afternoons filled with guilt and confusion. But instead, she took his hand. "You're right," she whispered. "I lost myself for a while, but I'm here now. I want to be here." He didn't ask questions. He just squeezed her hand and said, "Then that's all that matters." They sat together in silence, the rain tapping softly against the windows. It wasn't a perfect moment, but it was honest. And honesty was something they hadn't shared in a long time. Over the next few weeks, Claire began to rebuild her life piece by piece. She focused on work, joined a local art group. and spent more time with David. They started cooking together again, laughing over burned pancakes and spilled sauce. Slowly, the warmth returned, not like before, but in a gentler, more mature way. One afternoon, she passed by Marcus's old house. It stood empty, quiet, with the for sale sign gone. The curtains were drawn, and the garden had begun to grow wild again. She stopped for a moment, staring at it, remembering the laughter, the rain, the coffee, and the stolen glances that had almost broken her heart. But there was no regret in her eyes now. Just gratitude for the lesson, for the reminder that real happiness isn't about excitement or attention, but about choosing love even when it feels imperfect. That night, while sitting with David on the couch, she leaned her head on his shoulder. He looked down and smiled. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," she said softly. "I'm okay." For the first time in months. She truly meant it. Still, sometimes late at night, when the world was quiet and the house dark, Claire would think of Marcus, not with longing, but with a strange tenderness. He had walked into her life at a time when she was lost, and his presence had shown her what she was missing, not in another man, but within herself. She understood now that temptation doesn't always destroy people. Sometimes it wakes them up. It reminds them of the parts of their soul that have gone silent. Claire didn't tell David about Marcus. She decided that some truths aren't meant to be spoken, especially when they serve only to hurt. Instead, she chose to live differently, to be more present, more honest, and more alive in her marriage. One Sunday morning, while they were having breakfast, David looked at her and said, "You seem happier lately, like the old you is back." She smiled. "Maybe she is." He laughed softly. "I missed her." "Missed her too," she replied. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over their kitchen. Claire reached for his hand, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was pretending to love her life. She actually did as she looked out the window toward the now empty house next door. She whispered a quiet goodbye, not just to Marcus, but to the woman she had been before. The one who had been lonely, restless, and unsure of her worth. She had almost lost everything, chasing a feeling she thought she needed. But in the end, she found something deeper: forgiveness. For herself and for the quiet, imperfect love that had always been there, waiting to be seen. And from that day on, Claire promised herself one simple truth. Real love isn't about what excites you. It's about what stays when everything else fades away.